The marathon Midos of Moshiach series is sponsored anonymously by one of our donors, and in honor of the Training Postgame campaign, trainingpostgame.org campaign that we're doing with the Kollel, and we thank him very much for making these shirim possible and for sponsoring this program in honor of our campaign. The next attribute that we'll be talking about in the Mashiach Midas Marathon is it's a complicated one. It's a complicated one. Hamalchus tepach leminas, that the government will turn to minas, and it's not so complicated at face value. It's a breakdown of the government. We've already seen the fall of communism, and other isms have fallen. Democracy seemingly is still going, but the the if I could quote Winston Churchill, I believe he said that if the biggest argument against democracy is the average American voter, then the idea that a country is run based on the majority of the people, we're going to get to that at the end of the Mishnah. We get to Pnei Dork, Pnei Kelev, but the fact that government will eventually break down, that seems pretty straightforward when we see that everything is going to break down. That Chutz B'Yazge and Yoker Yamir and Hayayin Tia Yoker, Yavnit and Perivian Yoker. We come to Malchus Tepach Laminas. It seemed like such a big chiddush that will happen. The chiddush here is, though, as the Maharsha explains in Sanhedrin Daf Sadei Zayin, and really the Gemara is saying that. One Sanhedrin is saying that is that when there's some minas in the government, when there's certain pockets of apicorsis in world government views, then then that's problematic. When you get to a point where all the governments, the whole world, turns to minas, yeah, as the Melech Shlomo says here, Malchus Hasholetes Ha'olam Tapik Leminas, right? The whole world Malchus turns to minas. That is when that's the harbinger of Mashiach. That's when we can assume an Mashiach is coming. We have to understand, seemingly, if some governments are minas, that's bad. If all the governments are minas, that's terrible, right? How can it be that all the governments, being apicorsis, being denying God's presence and His existence, that is a sign that Mashiach is at the threshold? And I believe you can explain as follows: that the whole point of Ra in the world, the whole existence of Ra, really exists only so that we should have the ability to choose good. As it says, B'chart b'chaim, choose life and don't choose death. If we have Ra in the world, yeah, then we can choose Tov. That's in fact the purpose of the Ra in the world, is to choose Tov. What happens when there is no more Tov, right? At least on a global level, that all of the government in the world, everything in the world, all political systems are completely corrupt. Right? What happens is that there's no more choice. You can't be B'charetz B'chaim anymore. It becomes self-evident that only Torah is true. And in fact, this is what once my Yeshiva of Sukushleski told me when I asked him, "What's the point of this Mishnah? What's the point of everything in the world falling apart? The governments and the pricing and Azus and honor between parents and children and spouses. What's the point?" He says the reason is for Balich. The reason is that they should have an opportunity, that the non-religious have an opportunity to see that everything is completely false, and that they should have an opportunity, even though they were never exposed to Torah, to do tshuva, right? But once the entire world is completely corrupt, yeah, there's not one speck of morality, of justice, of true integrity and government based on morality and ethics and integrity, right? We like to believe our founding fathers of the United States of America, or the famous story with George Washington, right? With the cherry tree. I cannot tell a lie. I read, I believe, maybe it was Dale Carnegie or Stephen Covey. I don't remember who said it, but that story actually was made up. That story itself was not true. But in any event, this is the point here. The point is that when everything becomes corruption, then the Torah is self-evident. There's no more free choice, and therefore there's no more need for the world to exist as we know it. We can revert back. We can get to the position, we get to the time, we get to the state where Mashiach will come, because there's no more need for the world anymore. Because there's nothing left to choose. There's only one choice, and that one choice is the Torah. So we're seeing this in front of our eyes. I remember I didn't have a chance to personally meet my father-in-law. My father-in-law had a major position in the Brazilian government. It was the equivalent to the Undersecretary of State, and he left the Brazilian government because he was disappointed with the high level of corruption that existed there, and this was a this is a example to us that we should understand the concept of government as we go closer and closer to the end of days. The government will become more and more corrupt, and the more corrupt we see the government, the closer we are to knowing that Mashiach is almost here, because the Nekudas of Bechira, the point of free choice, is waning and waning and waning. My cousins once said in the name of their Rebbe, Israel Eli Weintraub, right? He said the window is closing and closing and closing and closing and closing and closing and closing. And there'll come a point when the window is just closed. There's no more opportunity anymore for free choice, and then Mashiach will be here. So as the window closes, there's a faint ray of light still coming through. Yeah, this in the darkness. There's a faint ray of light still coming through. Soon the window will be closed and it'll be complete darkness, and all the light will be on one side, and then Mashiach will be here. So let's all try and use these last. We hope is the last moments of the world as we know it, to choose to bar b'chayim, and as the Chavetz Chaim said, the days of Mashiach are called Yomim She'ein Be'em Chaitzos. We don't really want them, says the Chavetz Chaim, because reward and punishment will end. Right? The only reason we want Mashiach now is because of Kvod Shemayim, is because as long as Mashiach has not come, so Hashem's honor is disgraced. Right? Especially today in the world, where so many people are denying his existence. We want Mashiach in order the true Kvod Shemayim should come out. My colleague, who I told you, wrote a book about redemption unfolding, which everybody who's interested in this topic should read. He said, Rav Shalom Shwadron, when he would daven in the mirror on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, he would break down crying for minutes just at the lack of Hashem's honor in the world. And especially during this time of the 3 weeks when we're supposed to recognize the great lack of Shekhinah that exists in the world today, even at the Kosel Amravi, then this is really a time when we have to really think about this, how Hashem's presence is not apparent in the world. Hashem should help us see His presence clearly, and we should all be zeicha to see the Gula B'Karov. Amen.